Screen for the slides.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and take over the screen share right now.
Oh, oh wait, someone still needs to sign in. Hold up. Let me give them a bit.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, trust me. I remember how this whole thing goes. Hopefully the club's been going well, by the way, y'all. So
Huh? Oh, this thing. Oh, wait, that's um, recording the screen share. I didn't see that. Now you know. What the? Oh wait. All right. Is everyone good? Alrighty. All right, keep them going.
all right, for sure. Okay. Go ahead and do the nice little screen share, which I will share my whole desktop. Yeah. Okay, y'all should be able to just see this. I'll put this in slideshow mode. And cool. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop that we're going to be going over today. It's going to be on continuous integration and continuous deployment, shorthanded to CI/CD. So yeah, I'll probably shorthand it to that throughout the presentation. But by the way, my name is Ketan Joshi. Some of y'all may know me, may not know me. I was here a couple weeks ago, like a month ago, for some sort of alumni panel. So maybe you might remember me from there. But just a quick overview. Right now, currently working as a DevOps engineer at Paramount, and we work on the Paramount Plus app. So this is where a lot of the inspiration of this workshop came from. So I figured, may as well do a workshop on it. Y'all will get to know a little bit about sort of what I do on a day to day and what I learn on a day to day and what I work on. So I think this will be pretty cool. So yeah, pretty excited to present about this. It's a pretty great topic, and something to be aware about. It's not really taught too much in the school curriculum, natively, but I will tell you right now, what you guys are learning in college, you'll be somewhat well prepped for the CI/CD. There's just a couple more things you're probably gonna have to learn if you're gonna get into this. So yeah. And then I also wanted to say, yeah, if there's any questions throughout the presentation, the workshop, you can put them down in the chat or use the raise hand feature on Zoom if you want. Because I'll have it up. And I mean I don't mind interrupting either, but if you don't want to interrupt like that, if you raise your hand, I'll be able to see it. And yeah, I'll address your question. But without further ado, let's get into this. All right, so right, usually, this is probably the best way to start out, sort of something that might be a little bit foreign to some people, or maybe you might heard of it, but don't know exactly what it is. But what is continuous integration slash continuous deployment, or CI/CD, right? So the way that I think of it, and there's probably going to be several different definitions of it, depending on where you work and how the culture is like. But if your team is pretty aligned to like sort of like industry standards, which hold on, let me go back. So you see, I put the safe way, right? So what the safe is if you all know of agile methodology, this is sort of a specific way to go about agile. It's called scaled agile framework. And I took a little course on this. So through Scaled Agile Framework. So they have like sort of their own definition, but it's pretty standardized if you learn from them. So that's kind of like where I'm pulling my definitions from. But essentially what CI/CD is it is just a practice of supporting new features and functionality being pushed out to like a dynamic service, right? And this is a very broad definition that I'm actually putting out, right? Because this can be applied to like, you know, we might think of it in software, right? That's I think where the term is popularized, but I feel like it can be applied to like several different like maybe engineering industries, right? So that's why I kind of wanted to be a little bit more general with it, right? In terms of the definition. But if you want to be specific within, the world of software engineering, well, it's a practice of supporting new features and functionality being pushed out to a software service, right? So, how we can push software out, we can get any new features pushed to the software, and then how we can deliver it where it needs to go, right? So that's essentially what CI/CD is in a nutshell. And so specific to software industries, there are tools dedicated to carrying this sort of practice out, right? So we have tools called Jenkins. That's a pretty popular tool. We'll see a little bit more of that. Then we have something like GitHub Actions. If people have used GitHub before, you may have seen like, sort of you can set up like GitHub Actions, right? You can actually set up a CI/CD through GitHub actually. And this is actually something that the company I work at, they use GitHub Actions to carry out part of their CI/CD. So and then there's like cloud services too, like AWS. You could set some CI/CD up through there, and other services as well. I haven't explored those because the more tools you use, it might get a little bit more convoluted. So we try to have our focus on one tool. The one that we use at the company I work at, we use Jenkins and GitHub Actions. So we're actually going to be going over Jenkins today, but yeah, we'll get into that. So CI/CD essentially what it does is it comprises of, on a high level, it comprises of carrying out various steps enclosed in stages, which can be done in some sort of like pipeline as code, right? You could set up a whole pipeline to carry out all these steps. So you can sorry, I just saw your message, Fu. Speak. I'll get into that a little bit later, actually, but that's a good tip. Actually, it is a good tip. But pipeline as code, it's a very popular way to set up sort of your heart of CI/CD, your whole functionality. But there are other ways to do it that's not necessarily just strictly code driven, right? It's going to be a little bit better once I show you, but yeah, that's just what it is. And I put a star next to the pipeline as code, PAC, because this is what like I said, I think it's a good practice, and we'll get into why that is a good practice in a little bit, but yeah, let's move on. So yeah, I know maybe that explanation you still might be like, well, what is it still? Well, honestly, I think the best way to think of it is like, you think of it as like a shipping factory for software, right? It's a shipping factory that does a whole lot of things before the final product gets delivered, right? Like we have to make sure that the software is stable enough to be able to be shipped out. We don't want to just ship out broken software, right? So what CI/CD does is it takes into account a whole bunch of stages to make sure that the software is good all the way from the beginning stages of the software to when it's about to be shipped out, right? And we have various stages, which I'll get into as well. But as you can see in the diagram, right, I feel like this might be a pretty good way to look at it. Well, let's say you start developing this piece of software, right? You have a whole repository on Git, right? Yeah, you have all your code in there. Let's say now it's ready to be, you think it's ready to be, shipped out, right? It's, ready, for example, for a mobile app on iOS. You want to get that out to the App Store, right? Or on Android, you want to get that out to the Google Play Store. We have to go through the CI/CD process before we can get it there. So, we do things like in our CI/CD environment, we have, let's say, like a pre-build stage, which where we like set up our environment. We're like, okay, we have our environment. Let's pull the Git repository, let's clone it into this environment, and let's just make sure, we have all the source code, right? So that's essentially kind of like what this pre-build stage might be. And then the build stage, this varies depending on the type of software that you're building, whether it be a mobile app, whether it be a native web application. But they have their own steps. So, you would have to do you have to set up some logic to build the software, right? And then a test stage. So after the software is built, right, we pass it over to this test stage, which this might be set up by, it might be set up by you as a developer, or it might be set up by maybe another like sub team within your team. This might be like test automation engineers, or this might be what the developers set up with, like, let's say unit tests. And there's things called like smoke tests, which test general functionality of the app, but not everything. So just kind of make sure it's somewhat stable. So yeah, there's various stages or various tests that can be set up within this single stage, right? And then lastly, we're most likely going to have a deploy stage. So we're going to deploy to wherever distribution is. This, like I said, also depends on the type of software that you're building, what exactly the distribution medium you're going to use. There's several out there. There's one, well, for mobile apps, you might use something like what's called App Center. It's actually Microsoft provides that tool. Or you might deploy somewhere else. To be honest, this is very, subjective based on, the needs of the application, right? So, but the point of this workshop is not to necessarily get into like the specific tools of every single stage of the CI/CD cycle. It's more so just cover high level, right? Because once you get that down, then getting into sort of just the little bits, little specific parts, that I don't think that's too, difficult. So but on the pipeline, or like on this conveyor belt, as sort of shown in the analogy, we have sort of the stop button. So like in one of these stages, right, the CI/CD tool will check in this stage, like, okay, let's say in the build stage, right, something happened, there was some sort of error. Maybe there was some code that we pushed that broke, and that broke the build stage, and our pipeline will let us know that. And our pipeline will let us know in a reactionary, form. Like, it'll tell us like, hey, like, this was a failed build, and it'll tell us where, and then we have to address it. We have to make sure that this is addressed, because it may not be you that introduced the breaking change. Maybe it was another team that did, right? So that's something that has to be communicated. But yeah, that's essentially kind of what happens, right? It's sort of just this conveyor belt, and we have sort of checks on each stage. And if there's an issue, then we'll stop it, and then we'll make sure to address it, right? So this is how to make sure that we do not push any broken software. And that's how, like, sort of we do continual testing as well, making sure that yeah, we just have stable software pushed out to like a production environment, right? So I guess the next question is like, why CI/CD, right? So I believe that, after, working in, the company I'm at right now for a while, I realized like it's super important, right? Like the way that our pipeline has to operate, it needs to go through the whole CI/CD pipeline, right? Where, companies where, like, they're continually, having, it's like software updates, right? And their software is a service to consumers, right? So when you have when the companies have a software to always deliver to their consumers with updates that you need to comply with, like, product management, for example, right? Product management always trickles down requests to, essentially the dev teams, right? CI/CD is super important, right? Because, this whole process, it's best if it's if as an effective and automated process, right? And that's sort of the big theme with CI/CD is automation, right? Automating as much as possible, like your workflow. Automating the workflow is truly like, I mean, it's an art in itself. But you realize you would rather have that rather than having manual steps done by human at every single stage, because that there's actually more room for error in a manual process than in an automated process. If you sharp up an automated process, it's gonna move like a well-oiled machine, right? So that's kind of how we try to operate, right? So we try to do this so that if there's CI/CD, we have this automated process so that we can roll out any versioning updates, or we supply like build software for quality assurance, like QA. You may have heard of them. They're like usually sub teams within certain dev teams to test out the new functionality that their team has pushed uh on actual like physical devices, right? So we make sure to do that as well with quality assurance with QA teams. So yeah, we also use CI/CD to deliver software with new code push for QA to test in their own manner to truly test on production environments. So for example, like on like with the mobile app, right? They're gonna test that on actual physical devices, right? Or even on like smart TVs, right? The Apple TVs and your Android TVs, they'll test on that as well. So yeah, essentially these two disciplines with CI, continuous integration, and continuous deployment, they address major aspects that are now necessary, right? Like for a while, they're necessary in an agile based software development environment, right? So with CI, you want to make sure to develop practices uh necessary to implement, stories and commit the code and components to version control. Then you also want to take care of a build stage, which you implement any logic needed to create an actual, like build software, right? There's usually like I said, as I mentioned before, certain proprietary ways depending on the type of software that's building and what the tech stack is. So, let's say for Android, there's certain, build commands that you can use like within shell to, type in, you just run that command and that'll build, right? So that's something you might have to instill, or if it's for Apple, you have to run a different command, right? So you just have to instill that logic, right? Then you have to have a testing functionality, right? For any code pushed, making sure that the code that's pushed is validated, it's not going to be breaking. And then lastly, you might have a stage uh section where you have steps to, if you need to host something, right, on something like in the cloud or on a server, then make sure that it gets pushed out to wherever it's being hosted, right? So that's all for continuous integration. Essentially, that's what you need to keep in mind. Now for continuous deployment is all about getting it to that end goal, right? Getting it to where it needs to be in production. So like the first stage is like, you have, so let's say, you did the whole thing with CI, with continuous integration. Now it's time to deploy. So the first step is to deploy, right? So like as I mentioned earlier, there's different mediums out there to put your app or your software, wherever it's hosted, let's say in the stage environment from continuous integration. But you need to instill that logic. Then you have a verify stage. This is to make sure that the integrated code is operates, well in production, and the customers won't be facing any errors. After that's done, then you're going to monitor over time. And with monitoring, usually well, not usually, but your CI/CD tool could have any monitoring tools, or you might fall to using a vendor tool. And we actually use a vendor tool called New Relic. New Relic actually shows a list of all like the different versions that are pushed out. It shows all the different platforms that are being used on the app. So let's say like for Android, like different like Android TVs, like Sony TVs, Chromecast, etc. Right? There's so many for Android, right? And even same thing for the smartphones as well. It's able to tell us like, okay, like this many users are using this device, and this many users are experiencing errors on this device, etc. So it's very culminates a lot of data and in monitoring on various use cases. And then lastly is, if there's an issue, if there's any problems, then you need to respond, right? And this is manual, right? This is where, the devs just have to go back in, deploy, or go back in and, go through CI and go through CD again, right? So it's a whole cycle. So yeah, this is essentially a whole cycle through what's called a pipeline, right? So the first stage will be, as I mentioned, that build step where you have the source code being run on a setup and working environment. And then we move on to integration. You want to bring in new code changes into the build. This would be like, Git commits, right? As your tool of version control. Then you have a testing phase. So as I mentioned earlier, you'll have things like unit tests. Pretty sure some of you may know like what unit tests are, but like functional tests and smoke tests as well. These are specific tests created maybe by test automation engineers. That's sort of a subfield in its own, where developers make scripts to test against like the API, for example. So like the backend essentially. Oops. And then you might have a compliance stage. This is just to make sure that, let's say you have a mobile app that's being pushed out to the Play Store or the iOS App Store. Just making sure that the app has what it needs to be pushed onto the App Store. Because before you do that, usually you have people like release managers, or even like what I've done is like I've uploaded like builds to the Play Store, and it'll scream at you and it'll give you errors if there's something that is missing from like the project, like the Android project, something in the versioning, based on like Google Play's policies, right? So yeah, having something in there that's automated, we might be helpful. And then lastly, we have the deployment, which you push to your distribution services. So yeah, for mobile apps, App Center is highly popular. And then after that, you're able to push any apps, any final builds to like like the Google Play Store. So now let's get back to this pipeline as code. So it's a great way to configure a CI/CD system because of it essentially acts as a source of truth to a CI/CD configuration, right? Like we're able to see, in the code, the logic, and this is how the pipeline operates. The code is like what you go to see how it operates. Anything else, any other settings or whatnot, okay, like that can be adjusted. But the core and the heart of a CI/CD system, if you configure it as pipeline as code, is within the code. So, and since it's code, it can be committed to GitHub, right? So if there's any changes done locally, or let's say something happens to your local setup, then fix your local setup and then reclone, and then now you have your code back, right? So that's pretty awesome. And then it's just the best way to implement and emulate your logic, just what you're thinking, how the pipeline should operate mentally, how you think in your head, pushing it out and putting it into your code. It's just the best way to do it. So, right, just as programmers, that's what we're trained to do, right? So, sort of the same thing in this applied sense. And then, you can have various commands to be run to accomplish any needed task in your pipeline as code logic. So, you're gonna have to probably study the CI/CD tools a little bit. I definitely had to. So down here, I have a couple of more examples, and then on the left-hand side, you'll see the CI/CD tool, and then on the right-hand side is actually the language that they use to that you can use to create your the pipeline as code. So for Jenkins, they use Groovy plus a little bit of like a mix of their domain specific language, or it's called the DSL. Because they essentially kind of have like two programming paradigms to it. They have a scripted programming paradigm plus a declarative. That's something I had to learn as well. But once you kind of get around that, it's not too bad to learn. And there's so much documentation for it, and there's actually a lot of helpful resources. So it's not too bad to learn. Plus, I know that Cal Poly, when you start learning programming, they do in Java, I believe, and Groovy is very similar to Java. So that might be a plus to start learning that. Then with GitHub Actions, they use YAML or YAML. I'm pretty sure some of y'all know what like YAML is. Yet another markup language, right? Or if you see like the .yml file extensions, it's like that language. And once again, there's a lot of documentation for it. And actually, it's pretty. I actually like the language for creating a pipeline. So it's not too bad. And it's actually pretty good to like the readability of it is good. Like if you look at it, you can probably get a general sense of like what's going on. So. And then lastly, for like any cloud-based solutions, they have like their own like proprietary setups. You can actually use a combination of like various things. I think like you're gonna have to like attach something from GitHub Actions maybe if you want to use a cloud-based solution. But yeah, it's sort of their own thing that they have going on. And then I will say I think Jenkins can actually be used with some of these cloud-based solutions from what I looked up. So I haven't tried using it, but I mean, if at the heart, if you want to get down to it, you can integrate Jenkins into any cloud-based solution that you might use. So I know that was a lot of information, but I do want to actually like dive into a CI/CD tool now, right? Because I feel like it's probably a good way to sort of get some exposure to this. So let's dive into it. I also put a link down here. Most likely I'll send the presentation over, and if the club wants to push it out, then they can. So yeah, let's dive into this. I guess before I dive into it though, are there any questions? A tool named Lyra? I don't know. I don't know, Foo. You might have to look that up. Or if you want, you can develop it. All right. Yeah, let me know if there's any questions. I'm just gonna log in real quick to my thing. So by the way, like what you guys are looking at right now, it's not anything like sensitive. But like this is like what we use at work. So, we have like a whole bunch of like servers set up to be able to essentially all these computers. They're titled SpongeBob. Yes, they are. That's the name of my team. But all these nodes, they are all essentially a server farm. So they all are just like doing a whole bunch of like shell commands. They're doing a lot of like computational work in that aspect. So but yeah, so this is like a homepage you're going to come across in Jenkins. Right now, what you see down here is our process is running, right? So we see some Android. These are pull requests that are running. So what happens is, so these pull requests are developers are trying to merge their code into the main dev branch. But before that, they merge it into the main dev branch. It's going through that whole cycle as we mentioned, with an exclusion of a couple of steps, but it is doing testing of it, is doing validation of it, before essentially merging and breaking code. If it is breaking code, it's checking for that, right? It's checking for if it'll break the repository, right? So that's why these are running right now. And right now we have this job running. Actually, I can show this off. So this is actually a job that I created real quick. So as you can see, this is sort of a pipeline, right? So you can kind of see the pipeline right here. You see the different steps of it, right? So the pre-build stage, we have the build stage, and the build stage is actually building a couple of it's not building just one thing, it's actually building multiple things. This one in particular is building so it's building the Amazon Mobile USA Paramount Plus app and CBS app. And this one's also building the so the Fire TV. So like Fire TV sticks, we're building the Paramount Plus app for it. All right, I think we got a question. How often does your team deploy changes to production? We sort of have a cycle for it. Um, we we do it officially on a 2-week cadence, right? So we spend that whole 2 weeks pushing things to the developer branch. We push everything to developer branch and whatnot, and then after 2 weeks, like in our sprint, right? So that's our sprint, and then after that sprint, we will get onto a call. The release manager will be like, "Hey, did we get all the blockers in? Did we get all the features in?" And then if so, what we do is we actually cut a separate branch titled release. We cut that branch titled release, and then we build on that specific branch because it's a little bit more stabilized. It's not a dev branch where everyone's pushing code. We do it on that release branch, and actually, I won't show that, but we do it on the release branch, and then we cut that off, and we build on that release branch. So that's when we do it. So it's on a 2-week cadence. A set to production. To stage, it's every day. Almost. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, so yeah, as I was mentioning, so this is essentially a pipeline. So yeah, as we were answering that question, that was building the Fire TV, Amazon P Plus, and CBS app. So it got done building those. So now it's on its last step, which is a pretty cool step. This is actually a step that I developed as well. One of the first things that I kind of got into when I joined the company. It pushes out Slack notifications so that developers are able to get the builds and whatnot. So I think the first thing I'll do here is I'll kind of just like show on Jenkins like how how you can kind of configure things. Or actually no, I'm gonna show the pipe. I want to show the code that we have, sort of like how it looks, because then we can kind of transfer and look into Jenkins a little bit more on how the pipeline code actually looks on the Jenkins job that we were just looking at. So yeah, I think you all can see my code here. Let me zoom that in a little bit, right? So yeah, we got some code here, and I'm able to show off this code because there's nothing too sensitive that I can show in here, and this is because one of the beauties of Jenkins is you can secure a lot of sensitive information and like credentials, API keys, that sort of thing. You can secure that within Jenkins, essentially like a environment variable. And oh, don't take the code, food. Don't take it. I don't think it'll even work, but yeah, go ahead. Um, you I can show off this code because we've secured a lot of it, right? So we don't have any hard-coded keys in here, none of that, you know. Security is also another like value of the like being in DevOps. You need to make sure that nothing is being leaked. But so yeah, this is sort of the logic in our pipeline. And this is for our main dev pipeline. So like, we have to build based on either like an international region or a US region. So that's how we have it separated here. We do that because both US compliances are different from international. So yeah, so we kind of have to build them differently. So then we kind of established some code here. So as you can see, like it's very similar to like, let's say Java, right? You got a for loop here. This for loop essentially just loops through any applications that we're building, right? So either this list or this list. This is international apps. This is US apps. More specifically app variants, right? Because Android has different platforms, right? Amazon, Google, and then we build like TV variant, a mobile variant, right? So but this for loop all loops through all of that those apps above, depending on what the region is, and it will build it all. So this is just a whole bunch of like setup, but what it does is we clone the source code, right? So we set up a stage. So I guess I can start here. You kind of open it up with it's just called a pipeline block. That's the high level. That's how you start it off, and then you trickle down. Then you will establish some stages, and then in a pre-build stage, right? Like that's one of the stages we have. We'll go in. As you can see, we have this command right here. It's sh, and then it looks like a shell command, right? And that's because that's what it is. It's preceded by this sh. So you can literally write shell commands within here to automate that, right? So I don't have to, this avoids the whole thing of me having to go onto one of the servers and typing in clone the repository or whatever. This does it for me because I have it in my code, right? So now we have the source code in the pre-build stage, right? And then yeah, we have some other things going on. This is another shell command. This is a little bit more complex to like generate a version code of the app being built. So we do that next. So then we'll kind of go down and we have some other code here. This is just like your generic you establish a variable, we set it to a string. This is the value. This is actually a value in the environment that we can obtain, and then we concatenate it. This is essentially creating release notes. So that's how we do it. Yeah, we put that in the environment. And then we have our build stage, right? So our build stage is essentially, it's actually up here. It's this whole for loop. And what we do is we actually build all the apps, whatever array that we're building, either USA or international. What we do down here is we build all those and we build it in parallel. What does that mean? We build in parallel. Well, if we go back here, you see how we have all these nodes? Well, if we were to build all those apps as y'all saw in that list, it's going to take a while to build on one single node. So let's say, on SpongeBob 04 machine, we're building all those apps. It's going to take a while. So what we do instead is we tell it to build in parallel. And what it'll do is it'll choose any node available in the build stage to build the app. So in this case, we have SpongeBob 04 free. We have SpongeBob 12 free. What we're going to do is we are going to build like USA Google on SpongeBob 04 and USA Amazon mobile on SpongeBob 12. So that's sort of how we build it in parallel. So that way it's going to build faster, right? So that's like sort of a value of we use like parallel computing to do this. So yeah, that's kind of what the build stage does. And then after that, we have you know, a deploy stage, which is not specified in here. It's actually this is a little complex, by the way, like when it comes to like pipeline code, but I'm kind of just showing y'all kind of just like how it looks. So, you know, you kind of just get sort of an overview, but we actually call on this fast file to do a lot of the building for us, right? So this is how we do it to build an app, but you know, depending on the software, it might be a different app. So, you know, yeah, we have like different lanes here to build an app, and then we have logic even within this fast file to build. So, yeah, this is something that I created. And yeah, we can, I think we have this. Yeah, it's this down here. So we have an upload app center. So this is essentially our build stage. So that's what I wanted to get to. So this is something in itself that is something that's gonna have to be learned. So I don't want to go too depth into this. I wanted to go into this script though, because I wanted to show like, you know, what can be done, right? So essentially, you know, you could do things like shell commands, right? That's one thing. Your classic programming stuff, right? So yeah. And then oops, I think Slack came up. And then lastly, we have like a post build stage. So anything that happens after the build, which actually this you guys might, you know, sort of see, or you know, might be somewhat familiar with, but we actually call on a Python script as well. So this is something I sort of developed too. Like I said, you know, like I said, I don't have any sensitive information in here because everything is secured within Jenkins, but yeah, we call on a Python script to, you know, call on some more logic to be able to, what we want to do is we want to be able to send out builds to people in Slack, to developers, so that they can get the builds. So, and that is this Slack channel right here. So so all this that you see here, this is something that I created as well. Pretty proud of it. I created this sponge bot, and what it does is we link Jira tickets to any code commits, and then we output builds to it. So I created this part of the message, and then I had some help, and I had some help with the developer to create this, so we could tag team on this. So this is what we do after a build is done. So let's say in here, you know how this just got done. This is build number 72. So if we go into Slack, it's this one right here. And these are the builds for it. So now we can access them. Oops, not there, but on here. So this is our deployment, you know, where we can get the builds. And then we can download them, which is an Android APK essentially. So yeah. Okay, I got another question in the chat. Has anything ever gone wrong with the CI/CD process while you worked on this team? If so, what? Yes. I have there's been a good amount of things that's kind of gone wrong. For example, in this Slack part. So like if I go here, as you can see, there's some build failures going on, but I don't think this were for me. Yeah, I think other developers started to trigger them. But essentially what happened was, yeah, you see these build failures right here. Some of them were a result of me because I coded something within this like pipeline here. Well, here, especially when I was creating this part, which what this does is it uses the GitHub tagging feature. We tag every single release that we do on GitHub. So we do it in an automated fashion, but yeah, we had some issues going on in here, at least on the first part. So yeah, that's one of the issues. Another, we sometimes face issues like not daily, because like our pipeline's pretty healthy, but we face issues like build wise. I'd say one of the major issues that we were facing recently was so building an Android app, I'll tell you right now, specific to Android apps, it takes up a lot of computing power. Like in your computer, it takes up a lot of your RAM. Like no joke. You'll get a message saying, "Oh, application has run out of memory," you know. So I'm we had to deal with that, and we're still kind of dealing with it right now, actually. So what had happened was it caused a lot of the builds to fail. So actually, let me go into here. So I'm gonna go into one of our dev jobs, right? So this always builds the dev branch. We build it every night at 8 p.m. PST, and then we build it 8 a.m. PST as well. So we kind of go like around to make sure that we capture commits from from all the developers, right? Because we have developers working like in different time zones. So that's how we do it. But for example, yeah, so this is our dev, and then this one failed. I forgot where it failed. So if we look here, that's gonna take a while to look at. So what we can do is we can click on here to see where exactly it failed. You can go into a build as I clicked on, then you can click on pipeline steps. Then you can scroll down. These are all the stages that are posted. Oh, and this failed in the so yeah, this is one of the issues. It failed right here. And this is something I'm actually gonna have to address. So yeah. So this is like one of those issues. So I'm gonna have to make a change. I'm gonna have to, address it. And yeah. But that's how it is, as long as you react to it, then yeah. But tons of issues sort of happen. But we react to it pretty quickly. So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. A lot of pipeline failures have happened. Oh yeah, so then I wanted to go into like how you want to build. So okay, so this is our dev branch, right? As I was just on. Um, you would just have to click the build now button for this one as we have set up. I'm not going to do that because we don't need to do it right now. It's going to take a while for it to build. It usually takes like an hour and a half, I think. Actually, we can see. Okay, so this one took an hour and 11. This one was taking 39 minutes before it failed. So as you can see, that's sort of the build times on that. But we can go into another. So that's how that one's built. So on this code that I was showing, this pipeline here all runs this code in here. It runs this whole script. How do we configure that? Well, if we go into job configuration settings, I don't think there's an here, let me just go down here. Yeah, no sensitive information, but yeah, you just specify a path or the script down here, and then it'll run it. So this one's in Jenkins global.groovy. So yeah, it runs this script right here, right? But if you go to one of my other jobs that I created, which is this one, so this one builds specific branches. So this one, I can actually, as you can see, the last job had build now. You just build it, it'll go through that process. It'll literally run that script. Or if you configure it in a different way to build with parameters. And the reason I did this is because, so here, if I click this, you'll kind of get this. So you can kind of configure how you want the build to go. So in this case, I configured it to build depending on what we select. So let's say I want to build the USA Google Mobile P Plus and CBS app. I'll click that. Same thing with the TV. And I want to do the same thing for international. So I'll do these. But I don't want to build anything else. I don't want to build the other variants. So I'll do that. Then whatever branch I want to build, I will specify that. And then this is another parameter. And then this is where I can wherever I want the Slack messages to go. So yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much kind of the gist of Jenkins. It's pretty cool. So let me just shift back into here real quick. Because I know we got like about 5 minutes left. So I'll wrap it up real quick. But these are some of the notable Jenkins features that I kind of went over. So yeah, a lot of sensitive info with security in Jenkins. You can do that. Then you can also however you want to configure a job to run, your logic, as I mentioned, with pipeline as code, you can do that. There's a lot of plugins and a lot of support being done to accomplish whatever tasks are needed. There's even a plugin where like you can prioritize which jobs should be where you can prioritize job runs. So for main jobs, I probably want that to run above any other jobs that maybe other developers are using, right? So I could do that. You know, and Jenkins is not just used to like deliver and build software, but it can also be used for like that test automation, as I mentioned. We use it to literally run full regression tests, you know, where it tests against the API, it tests full functionality. And it literally like, oh, we have test automation engineers that have where they've set up like an emulator, and they had the emulator like go into the app and like do this and do that, make those API calls with the emulator. So like I think that's pretty cool. And then lastly, as I mentioned, also with the cloud tools, Jenkins can be configured with other services too. So yeah, that needs to be done. That can be done. So yeah, kind of speed run a little bit parts of that, but oh yeah. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I want to know before we head off, if there's any more question and answer or questions that I can answer. And yeah, also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. You can just search my name too if you want to. But yeah, no, not gonna DM any API keys, Mister. I think you need to be on a VPN too if you want to be able to utilize it as well. So I don't think it'll work anyways. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if yeah, no, if there's any more questions about anything, not just related to CI/CD, I know this is one thing that I've caught on to when I joined the company. And I really do like the field actually. But you know, if you want to message me about anything else, feel free to do it. Oh yeah, I got Discord as well. I turned off my message requests. I realized I think some people have tried to message me on Discord, but I haven't gone back to them because of the message request. It just got like put into there, but I turned that off now. So yeah, if you all see me on Discord, you guys can message me on there as well. So, but yeah. On LinkedIn, I'll definitely see your message though. So, but yeah, yeah, it seems like we're nearing the end of this. So I'll just go ahead and stop this. And yeah, cool. I'll hand it over to the club to close it out if as a need.